one of the things that I wanted to kind of go over is reflections. Now, if you notice here, this solid line is my parent function, and if you notice, what happened to my parent function to get to the dotted line? Well, this would be a reflection over the x-axis. This line is our x-axis, so this here just basically is getting reflected almost to a mirror shape over this x-axis right there. So in order to find the equation, we're going to look at this portion right over here, which is a reflection over the x-axis. The negative sign, we're multiplying the outputs by a negative, essentially a -1, but we don't write the -1, we just put the negative there. So when we go to do this video, the first thing I want to do is write my parent function. Well, this is U-shaped, so this is kind of like x squared. Describe what kind of reflection occurred. Well, it's a reflection. This is a reflection, sorry, this is really bad spelling, over x-axis. All right, now when I go to find this equation, all we're doing is multiplying the outputs by a negative. So I'm just going to do y equals, and we just put the negative on the outside. We're multiplying our outputs by a negative. We can even test this if we wanted to, because we can go ahead and plot points and see if it matches at this point right here, which is at when my x value is 1, my y value is -1. So when x is 1, my y value is -1. I'll go ahead and maybe write that up here, 1, -1. And we can test our new equation and make sure that it works. So when we have our negative sign, we're going to plug in 1 for our x value, which is our input. And therefore, we're going to get y equals -1 squared. Well, what is 1 squared? The negative is not inside our parentheses, so we're doing the exponent first. 1 squared is 1 times 1, which is 1. So we're just going to get y equals -1. And this is my y value. So when I plug in 1 for my x value, my y value is -1, and that matches this right here. If you notice, it took this point right here and it just reflected it. The x values are the x value up here is this x value here is 1, but the y value is now 1. So if you notice, all we're doing is taking our y values and turning them negative, which we see right here. All right, so hopefully that helps to give you an understanding of how this reflections work. Let's go down to this example. Well, my parent function, it's v-shaped, so we're going to get y equals the absolute value of x. And what we notice is that this is the same thing. It's a reflection over the x-axis. Okay, so all we do is just put our negative on the outside. That's it. All right, because we're multiplying our outputs. And again, we can test this. Let's choose this point right here. So we're going to get, that point is 1, -1, which is right there that I just showed you on the graph. If we plug that in, we have negative absolute value of 1. Okay, now if we do this, we're going to get y equals, what's the absolute value of 1? Well, that's just 1, so we get -1. Well, that makes sense, right? When I plug in 1, I should get y to be -1, which is right here, which matches this description right there. All it is taking this point up here, which is 1, 1, and turning the outputs negative. All right, let's go on. Here we have these two. Let me pull up one more that I have for you here. I don't know, it didn't seem to kind of it didn't seem to copy it. So let's go down. Let me get these here. Okay. Here we go. All right, so now here we are. Well, let's look at this one here, the one to the left. This is a square root, so we're going to have y equals the square root of x. That's my original. If you notice, it got reflected over the x-axis again. So very similarly, my equation is just going to be y equals -square root of x. Perfect. All right, let's go over to this next one here. Well, this is the same thing. My parent function is the square root. So it's going to be y equals the square root of x. All right. What kind of reflection occurred? Okay, this one is interesting because now if this is our parent function, it got reflected over on this side. So if you look, this line here is called our y-axis, and it got reflected over the y. It basically went from here and it flipped over there. So this is over the y-axis. Okay. So now if we want to write our new equation for this, let's go back to our cheat sheet. If it's a reflection over the y-axis, the negative is on the inside. So here, we're just going to get y equals the square root, and the negative is on the inside. All right? Some of you might be thinking, whoa, that doesn't make sense because we can't have a negative in the square root. But let's just go ahead and pick a point and let's see what happens. Let's choose this point right here, which is -4 and my y value is 2. So I'm going to go ahead and put that point down, -4 and my y value is 2. So when I plug in -4 into my equation, my y value should be 2. So let's test it out and see what happens. We're going to get y equals the square root negative, we're going to put our parentheses, our x value is -4, so we're going to put -4 in here. Okay, now if we look here, what's a negative times a negative? Well, that's just a positive, so we're just going to get the square root of 4. And what's the square root of 4? That's 2. So you see, because it was a negative input, our input was -4, the negative will cancel out here, just like we see right there. And we just get +4, and we get y equals 2, which matches our description. And so we know that this is the correct equation. Hopefully that helps with reflections.